Recently, I got my first opportunity ever to watch live sumo wrestling, one of the matches, a quick one, you just saw. It was a fun day. I'm going to show you a lot of matches, just distilled, highlights, and just talk about the sport and my thoughts. If you get the chance to go check this out, it's a very watchable sport, actually. It was really fun. But first, let's talk about sumo wrestling and its history, at least just a bit. It has a very deep history. Started as a folkloric, religious, ritualistic dance/competition as part of seasonal festivals where you're honoring the gods and trying to get their assistance in ensuring a good harvest, that kind of a thing. And so it evolved more and more into a pure competition, but that's why it's just stuffed with symbolism and ritual. The throwing of the salt seen here and the leg raising and stomping are the two easily recognizable kind of rituals or mini rituals. Check out the flexibility on this big guy, by the way. But there's countless others. Pretty much it seems like every action taken by the competitors before they actually fight has a folkloric meaning, something that ties back to the Shinto religion or the sport's roots in other ways. And of course it is quintessentially Japanese that all of this, seemingly, was preserved. Anyway, this becomes kind of an official sport in the Edo period, starts roughly 1600, and these guys became the celebrity athletes of their time and place, like chariot drivers and gladiators in ancient Rome. It was kind of like the WWE, except with a real competition, and you can see why. Look at this picture. They're larger than life. And yeah, make the joke about the thong, right? But that kind of loincloth was not unusual at the time of sumo's start. Don't mean one exactly like theirs. Can you imagine how strong these things have to be? But let's get back to this big man competing, this larger-than-life figure, being an object of fascination and becoming a star. I really do think that kind of 20th century quote-unquote professional wrestling analog is very useful in understanding the appeal of sumo. I could just make a video watching some matches or just regurgitating the basics of sumo. There's plenty of that already online. I want to add something unique to it, and this is it. Competitions between strongmen, think of like Olympic wrestlers in ancient Greece and Rome, that kind of thing. All that is obviously innately fascinating to many human beings. But there's also peculiar fascination with the big, as in big and fat, or, partly fat, strongman as well, like this guy here. And we are, of course, looking at Andre the Giant. Became world famous, and he wasn't alone. He tapped into this bigger-than-life, big, fat, strong warrior kind of template. Here's King Kong Bundy. Remember him? Here's King Kong Bundy facing Bam Bam Bigelow. Another example. And you can see this back in the old days. Here's Gorilla Monsoon. And guys like this, as you can tell, the appeal is broad and has lasted a long time. And it's only one type of fighter, or pseudo-fighter, whatever. So the other type, more like the Hercules archetype, would be most famously Hulk Hogan and The Rock. And this is a different prehistoric fascination. This is the super strong, ultra-muscled, incredibly fit figure, whether it be an ancient mythical hero or modern mythical heroes. And then what's interesting is there's also a fascination with seeing Type A go up against Type B. Right? Hulk versus Andre, like the biggest quote-unquote wrestling match of all time. Well, why? Because it's this mythic, age-old, archetypal battle in our mind. It's Hogan, kind of apex human. This is as strong as a person can get, tapping all the way back into like Hercules and Melkart, that kind of a thing. Samson, you name it, versus a stand-in who is, and I don't mean this as an insult in any way, kind of a stand-in for an ogre or a giant. And that's what gets tapped into in kind of the collective unconsciousness when we look at a matchup like this. But again, going with the big round man, the big strong round man archetype, that's still a human thing as well, because think of, especially in the ancient world, fat wasn't seen in such a negative light. It was a sign of wealth. You had more than enough to eat. Wow, what is that like? And then you add, kind of superhuman strength to the equation. And so sumo, to me, takes that fascination with this archetype, more of the giant, and is different from the asymmetrical matchups you see in some real combat sports, if it's open weight or whatever, or fake stuff like the WWE, because here it's always pretty much giant versus giant. And that's really interesting because it's such a rare story folkloric template versus the smaller or regular sized person against the giant, the giant killer. Now, I did hint there were exceptions in sumo, and here's one you should definitely know. Takanoyama, I think is his fighter Japanese name. Spelled like it sounds, go watch his YouTube highlights if you've never seen them. They're absolutely amazing. But of course, the great majority of the time, sumo is about this giant versus giant appeal. Rightly or wrongly, and probably wrongly in the main, we're fascinated by seeing people fight. Two people start fighting in the street, you're going to watch, I'm going to watch. But there's something special about, oh wow, those two guys are going to fight. Those two guys, either one of which could throw me across the street without even trying. Or break me like a pencil. I gotta see this. Anyway, here's a cool historic image, a sumo wrestler throwing a foreigner. Right, this was drawn in the mid-19th century, so mid-1800s, and of course this makes sense. This symbol of Japanese-ness, if you will, this quintessential Japanese thing, and these fighters who were symbols of Japanese strength tossing away the foreigner. Okay, let's move on to the sport itself and watching the actual matches I got to see. I had no idea this topic was going to bring out so much in me. So anyway, yeah, sumo athletes are impressive athletes. How many NFL offensive linemen or powerlifting athletes, two somewhat similar body types, do you think can do this? Or this. Man, that leg is way up there. Look at this guy's size. By the way, the leg stomping thing is part of the rituals we talked about, and you're stomping to kind of drive away evil spirits. Sumo wrestlers called rikishi train vigorously. The training is actually famously hard and even brutal. On top of the actual official curriculum, there's rumors and anonymous interviews about serious violence being visited upon junior wrestlers who aren't, judged to be working hard enough, etc., hazing kinds of things as well. But back to the athleticism, when have you ever seen something like this if you're not watching sumo? This is really amazing. And this picture tells us everything we need to know about the rules pertaining to inside the ring. Inside the ring, only the bottom of your feet can touch the ground. So you're trying to make any other part of your opponent's body touch the ground. And if you can do that to them, you win. Basically, the only other way to win is to get any part of their body to touch the ground outside of the ring. Because of these very simple rules, you get a really great benefit as a spectator. Somebody always truly wins. Someone is always truly defeated. So you never get what you can get in boxing, MMA, wrestling, meaning real wrestling, and all kinds of combat sports, which is a boring point decision win. In other words, you always get a finish in combat sports terminology. This also encourages the fights to be fast and intense, which they often, but of course not always, are. And all of this makes it, like I said at the very beginning of this video, a very watchable sport. Sumo is always open weight. At the competition I saw, as you can notice here, it's also open gender. I don't know what term to use to not get in trouble. But so physical mismatches like that one can happen. Listen to this smack. Open hand striking slapping is allowed. Just like 2 fights ago, because of the mismatches in size, if you can just pick up your opponent and lift them out of the ring, then you do it. A successful throw ends this one. Nice judo-esque toss here, switching from push to pull. A straight up bull rush. If you get your back turned so it's facing the opponent, you're in trouble, of course. Get pushed right out. That was a fun one. A good hand battle and action in this one until the bigger man switches tactics and goes for a throw. Gets under one shoulder and grabs the head with the other hand. And 2 fighters of the smaller variety pretty evenly matched, so you get kind of a stalemate. Which is broken. This is a classic ancient wrestling position here. But he switches from that to kind of a headlock, and that's what ends it. Here's where the traditional thong changes things so much. The shorter fighter goes for a single leg and can't get his man completely off the ground because the taller guy just reaches over and grabs on to the belt, basically, and holds on for dear life. So the aggressor changes tactics, grabs onto his man's waistline, and uses that to lift him up and carry him out. So yeah, totally changes the game. Smaller man wins here by staying on offense. But usually the big man wins as here, right? Sumo, traditionally open weight, that's why they kept getting bigger and bigger. Nice reverse here by the smaller man as he gets pushed to the left, saves the match for him, because once he does that, his opponent's heels are practically on the line, and he takes him over it. Right there. I say smaller, he was really just thinner. I think those guys were about equal in strength. Watch her slip her right hand out from under his arm and clamp down on his neck for the win. She gets him down just in time as she's getting really close to the edge of the ring. A good battle here, and it's interesting because it's very jiu-jitsu-like and judo-like, right? And, you know, changing tactics doesn't always mean it's going to work because everybody's ready for that, of course. But when it works, like the transition to a hip toss here. Sumo isn't the most violent combat sport there is, not by any stretch. You're not even allowed to strike with a closed hand, much less elbow, knee, etc. But there's something very animalistic about it too. It's kind of like two bulls charging straight into each other sometimes. Probably the niftiest throw we saw in the many matches is the one that ends this bout here. Big 9 out of 10 times the big guy wins this matchup, in my opinion, but not this time. Watch the foot trip. At just the right moment, she gave him something to trip over and leaned in that direction. Here, surprisingly, the bigger fighter wins by pulling away, when usually that's the person who's going to do the bull rush, subverting the expectation. Big mismatch here, and just too hard to resist getting slung out of the ring. Opening the door for them when they thought they were going to hit a wall. Once again, I like that technique. Here's why my son didn't like that I made us sit right by the ring. How about some rapid-fire highlights? And we'll end with a few of my favorite matches. Much smaller fighters scrapping really hard but losing in the end. Fights begin when both fighters put both fists on the ground. And size wins out again in this next match, but it's a good one. And the smaller man using lateral movement over and over again to keep things competitive until he finally gets caught. And the two of the bigger guys going at it because, going back to what I was saying in the first half of the video, that is the essence of the sport. The spectacle and the fascination with that sight. And so from a martial arts nerd perspective, I have now at least seen live sumo. Of course, it's on my bucket list to see it in Japan. Thanks for watching.